Good evening, Officer Waldman.
Good evening.
Let's talk a little bit about your background as a police officer. How long have you been an officer?
Coming up on 26 years.
And did you always work in Chicago?
No, before Chicago I was stationed over in Boston. That's actually where I began my training.
After you went to, did you go to police academy?
Absolutely. Everyone's required to.
Very good. And as an officer for 26 years, there have been significant advancements in technology, weaponry, and different methods of policing. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
And do you receive regular training regarding these updates?
Yes, we're constantly going through additional supplemental training.
And are you comfortable with the use of a firearm?
Absolutely.
Have you received extra training on how to use a firearm?
Yes, every officer is required to do so.
And do you have regulations in your department about when it is appropriate to use a firearm?
Absolutely.
And you're very familiar with these?
Yes.
Now let's talk about the night of December 6th, 1997. Were you on duty that night?
Yes, I began duty, I believe it was at 10 o'clock, and we were working a 10 to 6 shift.
And what department were you working with at that point?
We were working with the anti-crime department at that point.
And did you have a partner?
Yes, Officer Levy.
And how long had you been working with him?
Only about 9 months, but...
And you worked well together?
Absolutely.
And did you have anything that you had to do that night while you were on duty?
While we were on duty, we got a call that there had been a burglary, and so we went to investigate that and found out that the perpetrator had fled what we believed was on foot. So we decided to scan the area, see if we could find him.
And were you in a marked vehicle?
No, as part of the anti-crime unit, we were in an unmarked vehicle. We didn't have uniforms on us, but we have our badges.
And did anything unusual happen while you were patrolling looking for this burglar?
Yes, as we were going down Evergreen, which is a one-way street, we noticed there was a car coming behind us who kept honking his horn, flashing his lights. It was clearly that he was acting in an agitated manner and he wanted to pass us.
Now, how fast were you traveling at this point?
At this point, we were only going 5–10 miles an hour because we were scanning the area for the perpetrator of the burglary.
And so, did you let him pass?
At that point, we couldn't. Evergreen is a one-way street, fairly narrow, and there were cars parked on both sides. There wasn't room to pass at first. And
did you at any time suggest, hey, maybe we should let this guy pass?
Yes, I mentioned to my partner that we should let him pass, and at the first available opportunity, we pulled off to the side so that he could continue on his way.
And when you pulled off to the side, what happened?
At that point, he stopped his car sort of in front of ours, blocking us from proceeding any farther, and began to shout at us.
Do you remember what he was shouting?
I don't remember specifics. I couldn't really tell. It was either gibberish or some sort of foreign language. I couldn't tell.
Did either you or Officer Levy respond in any way?
Yes, at that point, well, not immediately, but once he got out of his car, Officer Levy also exited shouting police as he left the vehicle.
So Officer Levy clearly identified himself as a police officer?
Yes.
And did this have any visible effect on Mr. Ramirez?
No, Mr. Ramirez continued to run around the car towards my partner.
And how long do you think it was between when the car stopped and between when Mr. Ramirez started running around?
It was really quickly, maybe 4, 5, 6 seconds.
And after they met, what happened next?
After they met, there was an altercation where they were yelling at each other and they got into some sort of brawl.
And what were you doing at this point?
At this point, I had exited the vehicle and I was watching to see if my partner needed any backup.
And what did you see?
I saw the plaintiff, Mr. Ramirez, stab my partner.
You saw him stab your partner?
Yes, I saw him raise his fist and take the blade down into my partner's shoulder.
And what did he stab your partner with?
It was some sort of jackknife, maybe about 4 inches long.
So when you saw you saw the actual blade enter your partner's body.
Yes.
And what did you do at this point?
At this point, I realized that I needed to act quickly to prevent further injury, and I yelled police as I was coming around the vehicle.
So you again identified yourself as a police officer.
Yes.
And did this again have any visible effect on Mr. Ramirez?
No, he continued to struggle with Officer Lee.
And what did you see next as you were running around the car?
As I was running around the car, I observed him pull his hand back again to strike my partner once more, and Officer Levy was struggling with him. He reached up and had a grip on his arm to prevent him from stabbing.
And now this arm, this had a knife in it, is that correct?
Yes.
So he had his arm in the air, poised with a knife ready to bring it back down.
That is correct.
And so you said that Officer Levy had a grip on his wrist?
At that point he had a grip, but then within a very short amount of time his grip slipped and the knife was coming down towards him.
The knife was going to be coming down towards him. And what did you do at that point?
At that point I kind of ran through the options in my head and I realized the only thing to prevent this was to pull my weapon.
And what exactly were you trying to prevent here?
I was trying to prevent the death of my partner.
You were really in fear that he would be dead.
Absolutely. He had already stabbed him once and he was going again. And that close to your neck you could hit a jugular or something and you could bleed out within a matter of seconds.
Now, as you said earlier, Officer Waldman, you are familiar with the Department's policy on the use of firearms, that's correct?
Yes.
And you're familiar with the policy on using a weapon in order to stop a crime, is that correct?
Correct.
And is it true that did you think through the options of what you could have done instead of firing a weapon?
I ran through those in my head. It was really, really quickly, but we're trained to go through every possible option before resorting to deadly force.
And Officer Waldman, did you think about firing a warning shot?
I thought about it, but as we said, both my partner and I had yelled audibly that we were police and that he needed to desist, and there was no response to any sort of audio sound.
And did you consider actually engaging in the fight and trying to physically subdue Mr. Ramirez?
At that point, I was still far enough away that by the time I got there, it would have been too late for my partner.
And you believe that you reasonably, under the circumstances, went through all of these options?
Yes, I did.
And so you were left with how many options left?
The only option I had was to fire on Mr. Ramirez.
And at that point, did you want to fire Mr. Ramirez?
At that point, it was the only option I had left.
And
Nobody ever likes to shoot another person, but sometimes you do what you have to do in order to prevent the loss of life.
And you felt this was necessary to protect your partner?
Absolutely.
So why exactly did you pull that trigger?
To save my partner's life.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions.